Welcome everyone to the Ace Show. I'm so glad that you're here. I always like to open with a quote from Zig Ziglar, phrase from Zig. Mike, you'll like this. You can have everything in life you want if you will just help enough other people get what they want. And that's really the purpose of this time here. The Ace Show is to help professionals like yourself who are listening to this thrive both personally and also professionally. And so I'm really excited to have our next guest here, Michael Widell. Hi, Michael. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Glad you're here. Head of sales enablement at Qualified. Previously, you headed enablement at Tableau, I believe. You worked
Yep.
at
Well,
Microsoft. I'm not sure if you were in enablement there. I believe it was more marketing on the marketing side at Microsoft. Graduate of the UW Foster School of Business.
proudly.
Yes, there we
Long
go.
time ago.
Nate, I had Nate on the last call, and he's also the same. Father of two beautiful girls, sold books, another bookseller you're hearing from, slung the book bag for years with the Southwestern Book Pump. We'll talk a little bit about that. And really, one of the things that I admire most about you, Michael, of many things, is just your ability when it comes professionally, especially, and even personally, ability to take what might seem like a complicated concept or idea and you break it down to its simplest form. For some people like me who need a little bit more structure or framework, you're really good at doing that. And I imagine at some point during our conversation today, you all are going to see it firsthand. It's going to happen real time. Fun fact, to say that Michael loves golf, it was probably an understatement, right? And so I know that Michael at times can draw, I think he can draw a parallel to anything golf related. Would that be
This
right?
is true, and my wife can attest to
There
that.
we go. Yes. And so as we go through this call, for those of you on the call listening to this, whenever you're joining, thank you. Welcome. Be prepared to get a fresh perspective. Keep an open mind, that willingness to learn and a willingness to take action, because I imagine there's going to be at least two or three things you're going to learn in this or you're going to pick up that could be really useful for you in your career. And so think about ideas and strategies that are going to be shared that you can apply to your own business, your own personal brand, your own, and look for ways to improve your life. And so with that, I'd like to just get started. Let's just get to know you a little bit, Michael. I call you Michael, I call you Widell, and so I might say one of the two. But tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are now, right? Leading an enablement really for your entire organization at Qualified.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely a story that looks unlike anybody else I've ever met, and it's probably the thing I'm most proud about. I'm not a traditional sales enablement leader, meaning like I didn't get a learning experience design degree or anything like that. I'm just a guy who loved sales, who had a foray in marketing and then kind of fell into enablement. But I think it does go back to you and I's shared experience in selling books. It really sparked the passion. I mean, look, if you can knock on a door for more than 1 week in a row, there's something inside of you grit wise that fundamentally likes sales or likes the activity of like interacting with human beings and figuring out how to build trust and to build relationship. And that took me a bunch of places just after college. It's funny, I know that you interviewed Nate on the episode before, and he sits on the board of Foster Business School and oversees the sales program. I was the very first sales. It wasn't even a degree. It wasn't even an accredited program back then. I was the first like test class. I was the treasurer for our sales program,
I
the
didn't know
first
that.
graduating class to go through what Nate now oversees at UW. So it was very clear from like my time in high school. Actually, this was way back when a buddy and I started a cell phone store as like weird high school kids. And then sold books to pay my way through school. And then after worked kind of in the educational sector in sales. And quite honestly, this was back in the days where MapQuest was a thing, but it wasn't super trustworthy. So I always tell these stories to our 20 something sellers. Like I had a Rand McNally atlas, like a spiral bound atlas, a Thomas map. And I would highlight out my route that I'd call on my accounts and go through my territory and would drive 100, 150 miles a day. I always say if I would have found tech sales way back then, I wouldn't have left sales, but you can only like pound the pavement and sweet talk secretaries for so long, and then you just kind of get burnt out on it. And so related to that UW experience, I had a degree in marketing and thought to myself, man, there must be something in marketing where you work directly with salespeople. So it's almost like you are a seller, but you're in marketing. Because I've always had a knack for events and things like that. And that's when I found Microsoft and fell into this thing called field marketing, which is now pretty much every company has some sort of field marketing organization, and was mentored by incredible folks there at Microsoft for 7 years. And then that's where, again, we have all of these red threads, Shoop, that tie us together. Nate has been my mentor since I sold books for him and was recruiting me to this small little startup where he said data is going to be the future. And I was like, data? Who cares about data? Anyways, Tableau went public and I didn't make that decision in time. And anyways, they were building out field marketing at the time, and recruited me to come start field marketing at Tableau. So I did that there for half my time and was really proud of the work I did there on behalf of field marketing. And then Nate ended up giving me a call, or actually just slacked me and said, hey, I need help on the global partner enablement side. And I'd never had a global role and had never worked in partner enablement. And I'm always down to take a new challenge. And a lot of the skill sets I'm sure we'll talk about kind of transfer over. So that was my first kind of step into enablement. So led global partner enablement there for 3.5 years.
Had I joined Tableau before you, or was I after you? Do you recall?
After me.
That was after you. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but you were on Nate's team and I was on the other side of the house.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. And then Tableau was acquired by a company called Salesforce, and the guy who headed up enablement globally for Salesforce was a wonderful man named Dan Darcy. And when he moved to a startup called Qualified, he gave me a call a few months later and asked if I would head up sales enablement for Qualified. And that was 3.5 years ago. So it's been an incredible journey with tons of experiences, all to help inform ultimately, like, how do I serve people? How do I figure out where they're at, and how do I help them get to where they want to go? And I think that's what I learned in sales. Was it was fun to like be at President's Club and to be in the top 10% of salespeople. But I noticed, like, once I got into management, I found much more reward in helping people grow. And I just naturally had an interest, if not a knack, at like teaching people. And so that kind of has been fostered over my career.
Yeah. What was that transition like, right? So from field marketing kind of roles, were there any parallels? Was it easy crossover, or what was that? Was it a big difference? Because I mean, I know that people on this call, they want to move up to a different position, most likely, or a lot of them that are going to be listening to this, or they want to maybe even make a career change or a pivot. Like, what did you notice? Were the sales skills you learned transferable from marketing to enablement? What was that like?
Yeah, I think kind of the difference in my philosophy or thoughts about marketing, sales, or enablement, my key focus, I think the thing that differentiates me between peers I've met in the industry is, first of all, having carried a bag makes a really big difference, and having been successful at it. I think the heart of a seller is that it's really tough to sell. We know so many really wonderfully talented, successful salespeople, but sales is hard. And I think there's always a chip on your shoulder in any company of any size, whether it's Microsoft, hundreds of thousands of people, or Qualified, we're a couple hundred people. But there's always a chip on the shoulder that, like, nobody knows what it's like on the front line. And so that's always been kind of my heart, is like, man, I understand what you're going through and I'm going to help. I'm going to translate all the things you're saying and then let me make it happen. So whether that was from a marketing perspective, or now over the last 5-6 years, an enablement perspective, getting to being able to translate maybe some of the complaints or frustrations that they have into something that's actionable on behalf of the other businesses that support them, is definitely a skill set that is just marketable, period. Going back to that Foster Business School experience and being in the sales program, I'll never forget the very first day. The professors were named Jack and Bill, and both of them said, I want you to walk away with one thing from this program. And look, I'm saying it 20 years later. Nothing happens until somebody sells something. You could have the best invention, you could have the best marketing, you could have the best financial plan, but nothing happens until somebody sells something. And I happen to truly believe that. So I'm the ultimate advocate and ambassador on behalf of salespeople. And so that's worked for me no matter if it's been in marketing or if it's been in enablement. Heck, if I was ever to go into finance, which I couldn't even like figure out how a spreadsheet works. If I was to go into finance, I would take the same approach because I think knowing who you serve and how to advocate for them is a really important skill to assess in yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. If you've done what we've done in sales, it's transferable to just about anything. I mean, as we talk about the bookseller, right? I definitely would be remiss. I do want to touch on that a little bit. It's just too cool. It's just too cool. I did it for 8 summers. I don't know how many you did it for. 3 summers. Okay. That's all. That's enough, right?
I wanted to quit every summer, but I kept coming back.
Well, so what are the lessons, right? What do you think are some of the biggest lessons that you learned while selling? Not only as a salesperson, but you also led people too, right? And so what do you think are some of the biggest lessons that you learned way back when you were in your 18, 19, 20, 21 years old or whatever, right? Selling books. I imagine you still hang on to several things.
I describe selling books door to door as the most informative kind of fingerprint experience on who I am and how I'm made. Like those 3 summers, you can't work 80 hours a week for 12 weeks straight in foreign lands. For us as Pacific Northwest people to work and sell on the East Coast and on Long Island was surely like a culture shock. But what it developed and shaped in me was an ability to better understand and identify motivations of people. How are they wired? What is their personality type? I know you and I both share a really deep passion for communication and the art of communication. And I think even back then, understanding the way I need to speak to somebody on Long Island versus somebody in Connecticut versus somebody in Maryland versus
somebody in
anybody in the
Texas.
world is totally different. And what selling anything door to door helps you identify really quickly. This goes back to that law of averages. We knew if we knocked on a certain amount of doors, we'd get a certain amount of demos and get a certain amount of sales. When you get that broad of an exposure to different personality types, literally thousands of people in a summer, you start to figure out, while each person is individual and distinct, there start to become these shortcuts that we can make to understand, like, oh, it's this general personality type. I better speed up the way I talk. I better lean into the expressiveness, or I need to slow things down. And I really need to change the way I articulate who I am and what I'm doing on their front porch. That concept has been applicable in every facet of my life and especially professionally. Whether you're talking to the CEO of your company or you're talking to your manager in your very first job, it's all about understanding, okay, who is this person? What are they motivated by? How do I come alongside that? And how do they help me? I think that order is very important.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. I mean, we could probably talk for hours about the book world, and I imagine there might be some more references back. But let's shift gears because I do know you love golf, and I'm sure you watched the Masters. I bet you had basically popcorn and
I was in tears.
drinking.
Like a lot of men all over the world, I was in tears.
And you were rooting for Rory to take it. Yeah.
Yeah. Although it's just off camera, but I'll always be a Tiger guy. This is a fun never opened box of Tiger Woods.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, yeah. I mean, Tiger was my guy too when we were kind of growing up in the.
Yeah.
It was great. So, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts about? You said why? Like, why was that so emotional for you, and maybe even? I mean, I know for Rory, I know why it might be emotional, but what makes it so emotional in your?
Yeah, I think why you and I are both passionate about storytelling is learning somebody's story and going on that journey with them. There is no way we as human beings can't attach ourselves to that story, invest in it, and on some level identify with it. And so you take Rory McIlroy. This is really going to date this podcast, by the way, years in the future. But he's this guy who was this juggernaut, the next thing since Tiger, and he wins 4 majors as a really young 20-something-year-old. He's expected to be on this meteoric meteoric rise, and he certainly did, but then stalled out for a decade. Things went silent, and he was still one of the best players, but just couldn't ever, quote unquote, seal the deal. And we've watched him fail publicly on a global scale many
Yeah,
times.
a
In
couple
fact,
meltdowns
41
too,
majors. I
right?
believe it was like, yeah, tens of majors. Yeah, 41 majors. It was 10 years, 4 majors a year, 41 majors he's failed before this. So I think why the like misty eyes were happening for many of us guys and gals around the world is you've seen this guy reach the height of what we would view as like success, money and fame and all of that kind of stuff, and then yet publicly had failed so many times and kept coming back. Again, he had said in his speech that he had said to his daughter, it was the equivalent, again, let's date this thing, the equivalent of the Jim Valvano speech, like never give up, don't ever give up. And that's essentially what he said is like, don't ever give up on your dreams. It's never the end. And so to see him succeed, and I think the likability factor, let's talk about how it relates to sellers who are watching this. Why do people like some athletes? Why do people universally root for folks like Rory? It's his likability. And what I mean by that is his like authenticity. The most athletes or professionals are trained to give professional interviews. I stay within these confines of what I say, and I'm working with a PR agent to architect my answers. And
And they
Rory's just
sometimes bust
raw.
out those cliche
Yeah, yeah.
responses and everything. Yeah.
Rory's just raw and human. And so we went on that roller coaster with him. And literally his last round was this huge roller coaster, which is a lot like life. Like we would love it to be this beautiful story that's this constant incline upwards towards success. But oftentimes it does. It looks like this. It looks like a roller coaster. And all we can do is evaluate our lives in retrospect. It's like, well, is that roller coaster eventually going
Move
up?
Is it continuing to move up at least?
Yeah, yeah.
In this, yeah, that's right. And so you were already kind of drawing some parallels. I knew it. I knew you'd be able to do that. Golf parallels with life. But you golf all the time, right? And then there was a time, talk about not giving up, you hurt your back and you were out of it for a while. I much imagine that might have been really difficult to kind of not be able to be on the link. Is it called the link? Is that what they call
On
it?
the links?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to bore the listeners with sports analogies, but yes, golf is this interesting sport because it's the only sport that presents a different venue each and every time you play it and each and every second you do it. So whether it's tennis or basketball or football, like the field and the dimensions are always the same, but golf is constantly changing. Each hole is different. But yeah, it's always interesting. Speaking about the ups and downs and roller coasters, this isn't just professional, and we'll talk about this in a second, but like bringing your real self. People say whole self. I would just say bring your real self into things. I just had 2 freak back accidents that required back surgeries, literally 2 in the last 4 years. So it's been a really interesting life experience. I've learned so much from it. I've gone through all of the frustrations and everything like that. But to come out of it stronger on the other side is really, I guess, what it means to be a human and what it means to live life.
Yeah, you certainly have come out on it on the other side well, and you just always do. You always do. I love your attitude. I just love being around you. It's why I think you're one of my favorite people to be around. Is just your outlook on life and your attitude. And that's why you're such a great salesperson, and why I think you're such a great leader too. Are there any best practices you can share for anyone who would like to take their sales to the next level, or maybe even they're a leader? New leader, first time leader, their leadership skills to the next level. Are there any ideas or best practices or tips that you feel like I know the answer is probably yes, so I'd love to hear those.
Yeah, I think in this modern world or environment we live in, you and I have been privileged to watch the changes no matter what sector. Of course, you and I have worked in tech, but no matter what industry you're in, the demands of what we as consumers expect of our world has totally changed. And I think for a lot of us who have a few gray hairs, it was all about a very polished professional image. And we worked really, really hard to have this like business self. So there was the business version of Michael, and then there was the personal version of Michael. And I think as the lines have blurred, especially in the tech sector, between B2C, so business to consumer, like how you interface with your Netflix or your Apple account, the lines between B2C and B2B there almost is no line. And what I mean by that is like B2B buyers are just B2C people
Mm-hmm.
themselves. They still bring in that same mindset. And where I'm going with this is I think in today's world, there's some of the pluses of it is we've focused on authenticity and transparency. And again, I use that phrase, be your real self. What I tell our new sellers that join Qualified is, I don't know what experience you've had prior or what upbringing you've had professionally. It is our responsibility to be world-class professionals, but I want to do it in a very personal way. So I don't want the business version of David Shoup. I don't want the business version of Michael Widell. I just want the real version.
Mm-hmm.
I want the same version that would laugh with friends in the living room to bring that same life and energy into each and every meeting with a prospect. And that concept sounds mind-boggling for, I think, half of all sellers out there. It's like, how are you adding life and energy to every meeting that you step into? Whereby when that person leaves the meeting with you, even though you're just like a sales rep on behalf of a company, there's a low bar of expectations of what I'm going to receive from this meeting. Like, how do I get them to walk away and be like, man, that was a really great meeting. I feel better about life. I feel uplifted. If we could do that each individually, both as salespeople in each and every meeting, and then as people leaders in each and every team meeting and each and every one-on-one, quite frankly, this world would just be a better place.
Yeah, I get this is a gift of yours. You really are. You do embody that, I think, when it comes to leading a team or leading a group. And when I said team leading could be a small L and a big L. Like you could literally be a people manager, or you could be a leader within a team. And so I've heard you talk about the importance of being curious. And I think there's a lot there that really sets you apart from a lot of other leaders. Could you elaborate on how you think that applies to your role as a leader? Maybe even as a father and as a husband, like that idea of being curious.
Yeah, my forever theme professionally as the leader of sales enablement here at Qualified, and no matter what role or what company I am, the theme will always be more curious. In every role and function that we play in our life, be more curious. So what does that mean? That requires two things. It requires an active listening skill. So am I paying attention to what they're saying? And then how do I ask thoughtful questions that allows me to more deeply understand what it is they're trying to say? What I often find, and especially for salespeople who are watching this, obviously I watch a ton of gong calls from all of our reps, the best to the worst. And the one thing I think we can always be better at is our discovery questions, because the pitfall that we fall into, and this isn't just as a salesperson, this could also be as a husband, as a father, as a leader of a team, is we already like come in with this outcome that we want to see. And so we're looking for something that we can hear to then get us to where we need to go for the outcome. And so what I notice sellers doing is they'll ask a really great, thoughtful one or two questions. And once they hear something, a pain point or something that they're trained to identify, then they immediately go in. So let me tell you about how I can help you and how we can solve your problems. But what we miss is actually the true root cause. So let's use some medical terms. Like those are just symptomatic. Like you're just identifying a symptom and then you're throwing a prescription on top of it. You're not actually identifying the root cause of the pain. And that requires effort and thoughtfulness. And I know that it's hard oftentimes in these really quick meetings. You have a 30-minute first call or you have 5 minutes in the kitchen. But I think if we were to push ourselves to ask one more question, like in every situation, just think, how could I ask one more question? Boy, the depth of conversation, the depth of relationships that we would build with others would greatly increase. And so it's related to just asking further open-ended questions. Tell me more about that. Gosh, can you describe I've never heard that before. What does that look like for you?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Can you explain to me how you guys have tried to solve this before? Those types of things really uncover the like hidden gold that you've never dug or mined for.
And talk about storytelling, right? You're actually helping them craft the story and helping them kind of really get stories, elicit emotion. Good stories really help inspire people to take action. And so you're actually like Jedi mastering when they get a chance to kind of tell their story. People love to talk about themselves. People love to talk, and that immediately endears them to you, even if it's just that third question or that fourth question. And this is the way I understand how I'm hearing it from you too. Like the benefit for your customers, they feel like they're heard, they're listened to, and they're not being sold.
Let me share with you the best thing I've heard in the last year. I don't know who the sales leader is, so I can't attribute it to him, but I did totally steal it from him. He said, the goal, let's just keep this on the professional side. The goal of any sales conversation, we think it's for the prospect to say, I get it. I get it. I get why you exist. I get how you can help. That's not the goal. That's like a mile marker. The ultimate goal, the finish line, is that you get me. You get me is much more important than I get you. So the point is like when I am able to say, advocate, explain what's going on in your world better than you can say it. So David, you get me. You said that that's exactly what I'm going through. When we reach that eureka moment, that is so much more powerful than I get it. I get what you're doing. I get what you're saying. It's this level of depth in our ability to build relationships with people. And when I heard that phrase, it was just like, that is exactly what I try to live out and to try to teach every day as an.
And the idea is you want your customer, prospect, friend, family member to, at the end of that conversation, to feel like, wow, they get me. They understand me, and I could really use a lot of that. I mean, I still am working on that, Michael.
Rather than I get it.
Yeah.
Because what I would notice, again, for the sellers who are watching this call, if you try to do some sort of next step close, so maybe it's a calendar close or something, you want to set up the next call. If the feeling or the vibe you're getting is I get it. Okay, cool. Yeah, I understand who you are and what your solution is. I would argue the likelihood that you're going to get the next call or the next step is far less than if somebody was like, wow, David, that's perfect. You totally get me. What you've shown and explained is exactly what I'm looking for. I guarantee I'm taking the next meeting.
Yep. That's great. That's fantastic.
See how my body language even changed? Like, these are the things I'm teaching our sellers for. You and I and all who are watching, we're stuck in the Zoom zoo is what I call it. We're stuck in these
Zoom zoo. Yeah, that's great.
These are the spaces we're confined to, and we get to see each other as we walk through the zoo of life in these boxes we now live in.
I love that.
And
Zoom
so I'm
zoo.
always telling our sellers to pay attention to the space that you are using and that your prospect or customer are using. What are they doing that are indicating, you and I know, 70% are not the words. It's tone, it's body language, it's all of those things. So how am I literally getting somebody to lean in because of what I've said or how we've built a connection?
I feel like I just moved in too. That's great. Yeah.
This is disconnection. Yeah, I get it. This tells me all that I need to know right here. I get it. Not a real deal.
Yeah. That's great. You talked about a eureka moment, and that leads me to another thing, though. We talked about this just a few weeks ago, and I think I don't know exactly where it's going to go, but you talk about the awe moment, and I'd love to hear more about this. And so, what is it? How did you come to this kind of, I don't know if it's a philosophy or a framework. Could you tell a little bit more about it?
Yeah, it's all related to the things I've been saying, but
awe moment, which is what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Or Shoopy, I was just thinking about this. Maybe I could call it the aha moment because it could be AHA. We'll
there we go.
Maybe we'll put up a poll and people can vote on it.
Okay, that's great.
But I have the great privilege. I created this thing. The reason I have Abraham Lincoln here and I've worn his hat and I've dressed up like Abraham Lincoln I host a show for our salespeople, a podcast or like a video podcast every Thursday morning for an hour where he stands for Always Be Enabling. And I tell some story about Abraham Lincoln's life and relate it to some technology concept or whatever we're teaching
I'd love to see that.
And we've done 130 episodes and it's it's been an incredible program for the last couple of years. And my wife came in after a recent episode that I was doing live for our team, and she was just like, why don't you write a book about all these things that you know and do? And she's like, how do you know these things? Like, who taught you this stuff? And I told her I don't really know how I learned these things, except back to our original conversation. I've had this like crazy treasure trove of experiences. I mean, we didn't even talk about, like, I was a public speaker. I was a motivational speaker in high schools for a year and a half. I traveled the country speaking to gymnasiums of apathetic high schoolers, which is like the toughest public speaking job in the world. And I ran an entertainment company for another year and a half. So there's all this crazy stuff that allows you to like gather this information. And so she challenged me. She's like, why don't you write a book? And I don't think of myself as a writer. I think of myself as a speaker. It's much easier to do this than to put pen to paper. And I've always joked, I said, well, my book would be a one pager. I don't know what that would look like in a Barnes and Noble, but it'd be a one pager. She's like, well, what would it be? And I said, well, I've never thought about this, but it would be, she's like, well, what do you think? Like, what do you want for your salespeople? And I said, I want them to be three things. I want them to be authentic. So you've heard me talk about your real self. I want you to be authentic. I want you to be approachable, and I want you to be human. And she's like, oh, so like the moment is what you want for your salespeople. I'm like, that's really good. She's not even a marketer, but I was like, okay,
We like
we could
acronyms.
boogie with that. Or, once you've realized that, it could be your aha moment. But the point is, and you can see like all the things I think about and the ways that I think about life are all kind of integrated. But I think where people find value is in the human connection. And again, professionally, for some reason, we lose our concentration and focus on making human connections. We're trying to make professional connections. We're trying to make business connections. Now, that doesn't mean that you can be some like unprepared goofball, but I hope it comes through even in the conversation you and I are having, Shoop, is like, whether this was recorded or not, this is exactly how I would be. This is exactly how you would be. And so what I challenge our salespeople to have, and what I hope every person that watches this call would think about, is, what does it mean for you to be authentically human, authentically yourself in each and every conversation, both like recorded on Zoom and in a hallway if you do work in an office, like when you interface with somebody? And what does approachable mean? Now, approachable is an interesting thing to think about, because approachable isn't defined by me. Approachable is actually defined by you. I don't know what you view as somebody being approachable. And so it's my responsibility to figure that out in our relationship. How do I do that? I've already talked about I have to watch your body language. How are you responding to my tone? How are you responding to certain questions? You can read so much. If you muted this call and you just watched our body language, I bet you could intuit like what's going on, how we're feeling about the conversation, the things we're talking about. And I think that sense of like figuring out on behalf of the other person, what does approachable, what does authentic, and what does human look like? The last thing I'll say about approachable, because I'm really passionate about that word, is because I work in technology, things can feel overly complicated. There are so many buzzwords, and like the door that you have to get through to understand what people are saying sometimes can feel like it's doubly deadbolted. It's just like there's so much commensurate knowledge that you need to have, that I've really appreciated, at least for the companies that I work for, this idea of speaking simply and being human and approachable in the language we use is really, really important. And so no matter what product or solution or company you represent, I would challenge you, what does simple and approachable look like in your pitch or in your questions or in your conversation?
I might even add to that. This is really interesting because I put a lot of posts up on LinkedIn. And I try them. I'm just continuing to work and figuring out what's going to grab the most clicks and attention and whatever. And the one that is by far the biggest and most successful, most viral that I've ever had is a post that I had about opening day, where I showed a video of me as the Mariners dancing guy. And literally, it just made me more approachable and made me seem human and authentic. They're like, oh my gosh, that's Shoop, and I had so many comments and more feedback. And so I feel like that's a good example. It's like your posts on LinkedIn don't all have to be about some business related thing. Just show who you are, authentically who you are. Anyways, that's what comes to mind. And I think as a result of that, I have a lot more people who have kind of reached out and discussions that have happened as a result of that. I just spoke to someone today because of that video. And so that's how he found me. And so
I think the more, for whatever you want to define as normal, the more you can be just a normal person. And that's a really, I don't know how to define that for somebody, but I would just say, especially if you're a great salesperson or you're a great subject matter expert in whatever it is that you specialize in, you only think about yourself as yourself. It's hard to get a view of yourself outside of yourself. But one thing to think about or consider is like, are you approachable? And what I mean by that is we've all been in scenarios where we're in a room with an executive, or we're in a room, gosh, if I was ever next to Tiger Woods, like I would almost be like, I can't approach him. He is of like a different make than me, or I don't have the same level of intellect. And I think this idea of like attractability comes from a place of positioning myself in a place. Let's go back to the first phrase where like I'm here to serve you. And as a salesperson, really our heart should be, I'm here to serve this prospect's interests. And if my heart truly is to serve, what I want to say to he or she is, look, I've had the privilege of working with hundreds of customers in the exact same scenario as you. So what I'm going to do is ask you a few questions to just understand some of the things you're encountering and challenged with. And if it sounds like there's a way that I can help, I'll definitely suggest a few of the ways that I think that we could help you resolve that issue. But if it doesn't sound like something that's like either in the right timing or within your interest, totally fine. Again, I want to make sure that this is beneficial for both of us. Is that fair? I don't know a human in the world who would say that's not fair.
yeah, you're totally letting them off the hook. You're allowing them the right to say no, so that there's no pressure there. And that's a very um, open, curious approach, right? You actually are already kind of coaching them to be curious in that moment and say, yeah, well, I
Yeah.
guess I'll give you some time.
The most challenging thing, and this goes back to authenticity. So you can see like my life pivots around these kind of three words. You have to mean it when you say it. All of us, especially those in sales, we can smell when somebody's inauthentic. Some people might call it BS. You can sense and smell when somebody doesn't mean what they say.
Yeah.
And that's actually the worst thing. Don't say it if you don't mean it. That would be my last thing, is like say the things that you mean. Mean what you say what you mean. That's when you mean it and you say it. I don't think there's a more powerful kind of invitation, or let's use some sales training, upfront contract,
There you go.
that you could position for somebody to have a really fruitful like 20-30 minute conversation.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I want to make sure we honor the time, but I do want to talk about this, about the idea of being a whole person. And so as I look at, there's only a few people in my life that I look at and I'm like, I mean, I know we all have challenges and I know that you're going through it, but I would look at you as a whole person, a balanced person. You're really one of the most centered people that I know. And I think it affects your interactions with people and your business dealings. And it does. I think it's what makes you such a successful person, at least in my eyes. I'd be interested, how do you manage everything, right? Because I know that you have a busy life, right? How do you balance all of your responsibilities at work with your family, right? Your home, your community, and your church, right? How do you balance all of that? I think it's a sight to behold, honestly. I've seen you. We live in the same neighborhood. And so I just think you have this amazing capacity to accomplish so much, really, as a whole person. And so, how do you do it? Like, what comes to mind when you say that? Can you even put it to words?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for saying that, first of all. And then secondly, I would position it like this. Like you had mentioned church, and up front, I'm a man of faith, and that is everything. It's the foundation, it's the center of who I am. And that, just by the nature of that core piece of who I am, allows me to have peace even amongst chaos. secondly, let me give a segue from that to like the personal, like real life aspect of it. There is a quote that could be attributed to a famous theologian named John Wesley. And John Wesley said, somebody was asking about how he started his day. And he said, first, pray like everything depends on God. And then secondly, I then work like everything depends on me. So there is this act, no matter what your belief system is, of like each and every day, understanding that there's something above me to which I owe everything and oversees everything. But I can't just sit there and say, God or the universe is going to do everything in my favor if I just sit here. It's not a slot machine. We don't just pull the slot and then we just sit here. I love the second part of John Wesley's quote, which is, then I've got to work like everything depends on me. The order is the most important part. So in that, like, work like everything depends on me, to your question about the whole self, I think where a lot of people experience burnout or fatigue, let's go back to that first lesson that I was teaching, like a young seller. I want you to be your real self in each and every environment. So I think where the burnout comes from is feeling like you have to be somebody different in each and every environment that you're in. It could be in each and every meeting that you're in throughout your day, both in this virtual environment and then in the physical environment when we leave our office building or our home office. It's not to say you don't need to be a different facet of yourself. So how I am to my daughters is different than how I am to my wife, than to how I am to you. But I don't feel pressure or stress from it because these are all core pieces of just who I am. So the facet of that I may show you or that you want to see is just a natural part of who I am. So I think the reason why moving through these environments may seem easier, and it's funny, I've never had somebody put words to it, but to your point, Choop, is that I don't feel pressure to be anybody else or anything other than who I am. And maybe that's kind of the power of the decade of life that you and I are both in, is you have this like ultimate and complete ownership of who we are. And this whole idea, I know there's been a million TED Talks on imposter syndrome, and there's no way any of us don't fight that or don't feel it. But I just, one of the things I was most proud of is when I started here at Qualified, it was the first interview loop I ever had that was the whole C-suite. That was all, nobody under C-level executive did I interview with. And I felt a ton of pressure. And I made a decision for myself that I would not embolden, puff up, I would not exaggerate or over endorse any of the things that I am or have accomplished. I was just going to represent me, who I am, what I've done, and what I think I can do here. And if they make the decision, it's because they chose me.
Mm.
And so I think for all of us who are employees, to have that sense of like this, I'm here because they fully recognize and wanted and are paying for me to be me. I think that's a really empowering position to be. And that's how I think about it in every environment that I am, which is why if we ever get to meet people who listen to this, and I hope I get to meet somebody and we get to chat, I am going to seem and feel exactly like the same way I came across in this conversation,
Yeah.
because I don't feel the pressure to be anything different or anything other than who and what I am. Now it's on me to continue to grow and evolve and diversify my understanding and my skill sets professionally. But the core of who I am is the core of who I am. And I bring that and invite that into each and every environment
Mhm.
that I'm invited into.
Yep, I see that for sure. And you mentioned this, and I want to make sure we do wrap up here. This has been a fantastic, Michael. I mean, I love you, and I really appreciate you taking the time to chat and share with whoever listens to this. Hopefully, it's
Yeah.
hundreds and thousands of people over time, because you've got such good wisdom, and I'd love to have you back to talk maybe even more about being approachable, authentic, and human, or approachable, human, authentic, whatever really sticks.
We'll figure it out.
Aha moment or whatever for your book. What would be one of the best ways? Probably LinkedIn, maybe, or
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I know you are an accomplished, published, award-winning author, so I may need your help on publishing my one-sheeter. Yeah, I was just talking the other day with a couple of friends who have like curated this like public figure on LinkedIn, and they're doing a great job of it. It's just not something that's like been super interesting to me. Again, my heart is to serve my immediate community, both personally, and my family, and then professionally within the walls of Qualified. So I've never been one to like speak on a ton of panels or go to industry events. It's just not a pursuit that's been something that I really want to attain for. So I would just say you're not going to find me as like a super public figure. I do have a LinkedIn. I do check it weekly, and I think that's probably the easiest way to make a connection with me.
Yep.
Like I hope it's come across in this conversation that we've had. My heart is to serve everybody. I always tell our salespeople, for however long you and I have a relationship, my hope is twofold. One, I hope that 1% of what I do, hopefully more than 1%, helps you crush your quota. I hope you're the most successful you've ever been here, and know that you have my full effort to do that. But more importantly to me, I hope that in our time together and even the time afterwards, you can say you were a better person and professional because of your interactions with me. I bring that same kind of into the connections that I make with LinkedIn. I'm not one who's like chasing 10, 50, 100,000 LinkedIn connections. I generally tend to only connect with people that I know. So what I'd ask is if you're going to connect with me, just say you saw me here on the ACE program, because then I'll accept the invite. And I really do mean it when I say it. I'm here to help you. If you're a friend of Shoop's, if you're a customer of ACE, you're a friend of mine. And I think that's kind of our philosophy, Shoop, just as a group of friends and professionals. And
For sure.
definitely love you too. I appreciate you inviting me on your program. I always love talking with you.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I can't imagine someone didn't get some juicy insights from this. And this is exactly why I have this call, because you may not be out in the circuit making the rounds on any of the podcasts or shows, or as you say, really putting yourself out there. But this is why it's so great, because you're like a gold mine of just knowledge and expertise and just heart. And so thank you so much for joining the call and being part of the ACE show. This first year is going to be amazing. And I'm so glad that you're part of it. I can't wait to have you come back. And so if you want to reach out, do what he said, reach out via LinkedIn, mention the ACE show. And we've got another one probably coming next week. And then I guess hopefully to all of you, I hope may you ace your life. We'll see you later.
Awesome. Thanks, Shoop.
Thank you. Thank you.